Good afternoon, everyone. This is the September 13th, 2022 meeting of the Basalt Town Council. Our town clerk, are you ready to go, Pam?
I think so. I'm just hearing some feedback. Are you hearing that? Is that just coming from there?
I think it's resolved.
Okay. Yep.
Good to go. Okay, well, thanks. First order of business today is to call the roll and call the meeting to order. So Pam, if you'd call the roll, please.
Yes, at 6:03 p.m. Let's begin with Dieter Schindler.
Present.
Angela Anderson. I believe she's on her way. Glenn Drummond.
Here.
David Knight. Elise Hoddle.
Present.
Ryan Slack.
Here.
And Bill King.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have a quorum and can conduct business. First order of business is the consent agenda, which is thin tonight. It only consists of the minutes from our August 22nd meeting. So I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Mayor, I move that the town council approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Second.
Okay, moved and second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
consent agenda is approved. So the next order of business is the call to the public to see if anyone in the public would like to address town council on any matter that is not on the agenda, the regularly scheduled item on the agenda tonight. So this is for matters that are just general in nature. And we can take calls also online, so we have a virtual connection. So I would, and I would also just suggest for those that are looking in, if you would like to get online and talk to council, go to www.basalt.net under meetings and agendas. Click on the September 13th meeting packet to open. On the meeting access instruction page, click on the link to join the webinar, and then your name will pop up here, and then Pam, our town clerk, will admit you to the meeting. So with that, I'd open the floor. Does anyone want to address council on any matter that's not a regularly scheduled item tonight? Anybody virtually calling in want to address council? We've got one person. I'm not sure who that is, but
If you're online and would like to address council under general public comments, please raise your hand in the Zoom. Doesn't look like we have.
nothing. Okay, we'll move forward then. The floor is open. Next item is for mayor and council reports, comments. Any reports from Ryan?
I just have I just want to extend a thank you to town staff and the pool. I thought it was an awesome summer. I know we had kinks that we worked out and some stuff, but I know my kids had a great time. I had a great time, and I was there closing day with Dieter, and it's nice to sit down with him and just chat, but it was an awesome summer, so kudos to everyone involved, and it's nice to see that project come full circle, and that robot pool's a hit.
It is a hit.
That's like a total hit.
Fantastic.
Which is, yeah, like it's awesome. So, thank you to everyone.
Yeah, ditto.
And for doggy days,
Yeah.
because I went to doggy days.
Oh, you did? Good.
Which looked like that was a hit too. I
It was
saw
a
it
hit.
during the football game.
Yeah, that was a great time.
How many people do you think were there when you were there? How many dogs, I should say?
There was probably 15 dogs
Oh,
and probably twice that many doggy parents and hot dogs and hamburgers.
And we had dogs on the slide, is that correct?
No.
No. Didn't happen,
No.
right, Michelle? Didn't happen.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, any other comments? Just point out that on last Thursday, the 8th, so our manager and I attended our RAFTA meeting, and we had a long discussion about first and last mile, and we had quite a good presentation from our downtowner representatives, and the board, I think, is well disposed to funding us again for another year at this, and then probably from that point on, we're going to have to figure out what this system's going to look like long-term and what it looks like more permanent, but I think there will be an interest in some branding and participation by RAFTA in this in the future, so it's not just strictly Town of Basalt and downtowner, so that was all good.
I do have one question. I saw that they slimmed down one of the vans to a.
No, they
It
have.
broke.
It's broken down. So
Never
that's
mind.
temporary. Yeah.
Okay. I just didn't know if we were saving cost or.
No,
No, the AC went out of it.
You referring to the
Not a
Chevy
brand name.
Bolt?
No, I think it's like a Toyota.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like a
Yeah.
Toyota SUV that.
Yeah, I think
I
that's a
saw branded.
Yeah.
temporary measure.
Was there any discussion of using electric vehicles next year?
Yeah, and Ryan made a good comment about, our interest in the Ford vans, and you want to comment about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think for next year, the cost for those vans is quite a bit more, so, and then we'd have to plan to build the infrastructure. And so I think before we do that, I think we wanna know, is this something we're gonna take on long-term?
Right.
And I think, as Bill mentioned, we talked about like funding and how, different funding mechanisms for it. And so I think that's something we'll wanna take up with council, and I think if we do make it that kind of long-term thing, then I think it's something we wanna look at. Right now, they park the vans over on Rafta, property at the Park and Ride, and so if they did that, then, we need to work with them to get the, electric charging stations. But I think that's a general interest from Rafta, from the town, and then others, and I think we're being looked at also from the other towns that don't already have it as, a real test case, because I think there's a lot of interest, Carbondale, even down in Glenwood potentially, so, and one of the things we did hear, is ridership this summer really, bounced, back up, and from the perspective of RAFTA, the cost per rider, is about $20, which at face value could seem, a lot, but they said, that's actually very low. It's about half of what, the cost, would be for this type of shuttle service. So everything's pointing to this being pretty great. And I think what we'll want to figure out is just greater continuity over time as a goal, so that we, the drivers get to be employed the whole time, that the riders have more predictability if we're, really trying to have a goal of, getting people out of their automobiles. Things like that. All things are looking pretty good.
We'll get an updated presentation from them.
We will.
Right before,
Any other comments, thoughts? Okay, managers report.
Just a couple of quick things. If any of you, I know you probably have, walked down Swinging Bridge Trail recently, we've got a small little project going on there. Kind of finishing up when we did the water line on Swinging Bridge last year. We had torn up sort of a little park area that's right there, and then in the roundabout area. So we're going back and just doing some landscaping back into those areas. So if you see that, that's what we are up to. That is a town project. And we have grass at the park, so it's looking a lot like a park now over there. So that's all coming together. Had a lot of positive comments on that recently from folks that have been waiting for that project to come to fruition for a long time. So good to hear. And then our Public Works barn that we're working on this summer, the pour for the foundation should happen imminently. They've been putting in the steel for that foundation, and then pretty quickly thereafter, the building should get on site, and it should go up pretty fast. So
Yeah.
We'll see that phase one completed in short order.
Cool. All right, well, thank you. So with that, we'll turn to presentations. And the first of these is the Invoice Cloud Online Utility Payment Program. So Jenny, come on up. I know this is going to be a welcome addition in our household.
So this
Deal.
week, I'm sure most of you got our letter. It was in our, in the packet that we sent out to everyone, stating the new fee structure and that you can log online and create your portal. So it's now live. My phone was blowing up today with a lot of questions on, what do I do? But there is still 3 options. You can sign up for auto pay. on the portal. You can do one-time payments on the portal, or you can still bring us a check here and drop off for no fee. So there, but we did make sure everyone realized like the fees that are associated with the portal. And hopefully a lot will start signing up and we'll get a lot of paperless. But overall, I think people are excited about, you know, being able to be in the present day and being able to go online and set everything up. We did have our first person, before we even send out the letter, go live, even like when I put it live on our website. It was 2016 Arbor Park was our first person who did it and did it all by themselves, and yeah.
Well, so it's up and live and going, huh?
Yeah, so you
Yeah.
can set it up. So yeah, basalt.net/waterbill. You'll get all the information on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a little PowerPoint presentation in the packet too, if you got a chance to see it.
You can go, if we go on that. You can bring up our website too.
There we go.
There we go. All the information, yep, is up on our website. Yeah, and this is actually real-time data, so it comes into Casell, our accounting system. So I can see, when people pay online, then their balance reflects as zero for me as well, which takes a lot off my plate. Yeah.
Do we have any intelligence that would suggest that this improves kind of collection percentages and
We will.
on-time
Yeah,
performance?
and then we'll
it
be
really
able-
helps?
Yes. We'll be able to send out reminders, like right now it's set up to send it for initial bill, and then a reminder after 10 days, and then a reminder after 15, and then a past due on the 20th. So, and then as people start building this database with their email addresses, then
Great.
we'll get more notifications out there. But
Good deal.
So in lieu of a paper bill, they'll get this notification via email or something?
if they sign up for paperless, you can still get a paper bill
Okay.
if you want. But if you sign up for paperless, then you'll get it just via email. And I think once you sign up, if you don't sign up for paperless, you'll still get the email notification too. So you can get paper form and an email notification.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
I just have one, will we be able to track, I know we're charging a $3 fee, we have to pay some percentage on the credit card. Will we be able to see that difference,
Yeah,
like at the end of the year?
yeah.
I'm sure it's not gonna be
Yeah, so we'll
insane,
have a
but it'll-
statement each month of how much we pass the fee along versus how much we're paying in it. Cause it's a smaller percentage of that the $3.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So in order to have this service, the town is actually assuming some of the fees
Yeah.
that are associated with it.
Yeah.
So we're not passing 100% of it along to the customer, because we wanted people to use it and
Yeah.
we want it to be a convenience, but assuming it all didn't make sense, so we kind of split the fees, more or less.
People
It'd
love
just
to
be
write
interesting
checks,
to
can
see
still
for
write checks
a
and
year
drop them off at
Yeah.
town hall.
always
Yeah.
come here, drop off a check or mail a check too, for no cost. So,
All right. Questions of Jenny about our automated water bills? Cool. This is progress. Thanks.
yeah.
Thank you for getting it
Appreciate
set up.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Next up is Catherine's going to present where we are with our Basalt Forward 2030 Solar Initiative. Welcome, Catherine. Good evening.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And we also have Donald Klung and Ashley Rassavan, I'm probably gonna butcher her last name, on the line. They're from our consultant team of McKinstry that's been helping us on this
Great.
project. And conveniently, we do have Mike Steiner in the audience too with Holy Cross, so he can help fill in some
Excellent.
gaps too.
You didn't know you were presenting tonight, did you?
So we'll get started. As you know, the town has been working with McKinstry and with the school district as well and Holy Cross Energy on the development of a large solar and potentially battery project. This was identified in the 2020 master plan and funded as part of the Basalt Forward projects. Next slide, thanks, James. And generally, the team has started to move. They started the project by looking at, first getting with the team to understand, what we were trying to accomplish, what we were trying to what our goals were of the project. And then the next step was there were a number of sites outlined in the RFP that we had out that we at least initially wanted the team to look at for their solar viability. So McKinstry and their group did that to just determine the initial feasibility. We're able to kind of pivot a little bit on certain sites that quickly became apparent that those weren't going to work out, and we're able to look at a couple others. They then completed a conceptual layouts for some feasible solar arrays and storage sites based on that kind of initial analysis. And then they presented their initial findings to town staff, the school district, and Holy Cross Energy. And they were able to also in that presentation do some kind of very initial preliminary cost-benefit analysis, so that could kind of help in our initial decision making on what sites it made sense to move forward with. Next slide, James. And then and as part of that presentation, McKinstry gave us a kind of debrief on the potential for battery storage. It was determined that the high school site was potentially the most viable of the sites for some type of energy storage. As you may all recall, that was used as a hub during the Lake Christine fire. It's a place where lots of people can gather. So they did an initial kind of potential storage volume that could be placed on site that was based on the school's current metered uses. So it was an analysis of what energy uses they use today, so they could do an analysis of what kind of offset we could see with some type of storage. The best fit for storage was this Tesla product. So that's a battery type, and if you have further questions on that, I'm sure Ashley can chime in. But it was determined that best fit product really only provided a limited time span of how long it could provide the school its energy uses. So for only 20 hours would it really be able to power the school if it was 100% charge, and then only for 3 to 4 hours if the battery was at a lesser charge of 20%. That product costs around $1.4 million, and at this point those batteries are really only have a 10-year lifespan before their use starts to diminish. So at that price point, and given that that technology around battery storage is moving at such a rapid pace, we did make the determination that at this point it doesn't make sense for the town to invest in energy storage. It's definitely not off the table for the future, especially with other sites that the town may be developing in the future. It may make sense for it to be actually on a town-owned property, but again, with that technology developing, we think that now is not the right time to invest in battery storage. So moving on from battery storage, we were able to identify 5 different sites for solar arrays. The 5 of those are in front of you now. The first one that is titled Eligible, that's actually the bus barn, or where the buses for the school district are housed. And one of the reasons that site was of interest is because when their fleet hopefully begins to electrify, that would be kind of a first step as a way to help, help in the charging of those vehicles. The second is the Basalt Elementary School, so that would be a roof-mounted site. We also looked at the Basalt Middle School for a roof mount application because of the age of the roof systems on the various schools. The school district felt most comfortable with the elementary school for the rooftop application. And then there are 2 sites at Basalt High School. One will be a ground-mounted array, which you'll, be able to see as you approach the school. It will be there on your right. And then the other is on top of the Basalt High School concessions. And we did confirm that balls that are thrown won't damage the solar panels too poorly. And then the final is the Basalt Public Works building, the building that Ryan just mentioned, that's under construction. The hope is to do a solar array on top of that building as the fifth. And then next, Ashley is going to help get us into some of the nitty-gritty details of what all this means.
Yep, thanks, Catherine. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Brassavan. I'm a senior account executive at McKinstry. So I've been with this project since we kicked it off in early 2022. We quickly wanted to go through kind of what the project sizes and offsets looked like at each of those different sites that Catherine went through. So the high school definitely has the biggest size by far at 185 kW, and then it kind of varies from there with the concessions being the smallest. So the whole portfolio is about 310 kilowatts DC, and that was based on kind of combining the best financials and project economics, what the roof could hold, and then looking at the load offsets. You have a year one production or an annual production of 466,000 kWh, and then their solar offsets range from anywhere from 11% offset at the elementary school up to 92% at the concessions. And so there are also a lot of environmental impacts. This offsets a lot of energy and utility costs, which is equivalent to about 2,000 passenger vehicles off the road annually and about 1 million gallons of gasoline consumed per year. So good offset, good amount of solar across the town and school district, and also a lot of positive environmental outcomes as well. So go to the next slide. So here's a breakdown of the project financials across those 5 different sites. So the full portfolio is $1.1 million across all those sites. There was a DOLA grant submitted, so it's Department of Local Affairs, and they fund energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. That grant for that $574,000 was submitted on September 1st, and then there'll be a project interview in early December and hopefully awards by the end of 2022, so you should hear back on that by the end of the year. That's expected to offset about 50% of the total cost of the project, with a Town of Basalt match requirement of the other 50%, so the $574,000. The total annual utility savings across the portfolio are $37,000 a year, and that's a 15-year payback if the grant is awarded. So the final slide just goes through kind of where we've been and where we're going. We kicked off this project and were awarded this under competitive contract in early 2022. The phase 1 included engaging staff, the community, and Holy Cross. We went through and did initial audits and analyzed the information and got to the end of phase 1 where we presented the full analysis, including storage and solar. The portfolio recommended to move forward to phase 2 was the current portfolio that you just saw. That's in final development. You can see the DOLA grant was submitted on September 1st, and we expect to hear back in the December timeframe on that, and then we'll move into final design and hopefully construction by early 2023. So I think Donald, our project director, is also online, and we're happy to take questions. But I'll hand it back to Catherine.
Yeah, that's really all we have, is just a brief presentation. We're here to answer any questions you all have.
Great. Well, it looks like probably we're making the right call with the battery storage. It's disappointing. We thought that was going to be a big feature, but cost and technology we could end up spending more on storage than the actual power generation itself, which would be a kind of peculiar enterprise, I would say. So, I guess I fully support the idea of putting this money into power generation 100%. Could you speak just a little bit about the operating economics And I just, like, a companion question is about maintenance, and who maintains the system? Is it Holy Cross? Is it us? And what are we're putting this on the grid and being reimbursed, and what is that rate, 5 or 6 cents a kilowatt hour, or something like that? What are we looking forward to? I know Ryan and I have talked about it, but,
Get in there, Mike.
Yeah.
yeah, come on.
So we went through the project economics with McKinstry,
Yeah,
and our tariffs allow, we have a 25 kilowatt net metering cap. Anything above that goes into another tariff, what we call our generation tariff. And at that rate, you're compensated monthly based on our avoided cost of energy. And we evaluate that every year. So that's currently 4.4 cents a kilowatt hour. And that changes every year. Some years it's 3.5 cents, some years it's 3.2 cents, et cetera. So that's how these larger projects
yeah,
get characterized.
cool. So what does that spell dollar-wise? Have you do we have a budget? Does it look like, what kind of cash is this gonna throw for the town?
Yeah, I might lean on Ashley. She did a detailed analysis of our operations and maintenance and how that would play into the payback analysis that she did for the DOLA grant.
Yeah, we do have a full cash flow available that we can provide if that would be helpful. That kind of has the matrix of the ongoing O&M costs, what the annual savings would be across the portfolio, and the net metering credits that Mike was just talking about. Donald can go into a little bit more detail on what that looks like from a technical perspective of actual O&M on the systems too.
Yeah, so hi everybody, this is Donald. You know, the O&M costs, like Ashley said, we have an estimate for. I mean, the bill savings, I think that we just showed were in the first year about $37,000. And just to add on to what Mike was saying on that real quick, that export issue or that export policy, you know, we were trying to balance that against trying to meet the goal of deploying as much and providing as much benefit as possible, but staying within a reasonable financial scenario. And so that it's a balancing game. And so this is just kind of where we've landed, trying to make sure the systems weren't producing so much that it was exporting a lot, because that degrades the value. And that was a big piece of our analysis. We looked at some sensitivity of export versus self-consumption and then size systems accordingly. Going back to O&M, I mean, as a rough number, it's about $8 to $10 a kW per year. So at 300 kWs times, you know, $10, it's about $3,000 a year. So what goes into that is that's typically preventive maintenance. So there will be monitoring services provided to keep an eye on the systems once they're in service and commissioned. Look for faults, monitor alerts and alarms, and then an annual inspection that's typically, again, preventive in nature and can take care of small corrective maintenance items like checking inverter filters, checking torques on terminations, and kind of basic maintenance like that. To the question of who performs this, in this structure, we're proposing that the town owns these systems. And therefore, the town is ultimately responsible or can make the decision on how much to spend on O&M and what activities to deploy. Because on the smaller end, there is a cost benefit sort of game to be looked at. And then who actually literally performs it can be contracted. We might be able to, or we should be able to help find contractors, or you could contract potentially directly through us. But then the other thing we would advise is just, again, finding the right balance between cost and benefit. Because at a $37,000 a year savings, and if we're talking about $3,000 cost a year, potentially more, you know, is it worth it at consuming that much of your savings? That's a decision the town can make, but we're here to help you think through those numbers and find the right balance again. So I seem to be coming back to balance a lot, but project development's a lot about balance, cost benefits, and finding the right mix.
And I would just add briefly that one of the things we're looking at with the school, for the arrays that are on school property, is that we would roughly split the savings with them. So the town would assume some of those savings, and then the school would as well. And that's just sort of the freight for them for occupying the property there. And for our part, any revenue that kind of gets spun off, at least an initial thought or proposal is we use that for green team projects. So you can have a little bit of a revenue source there for that funding. So
Great. Yeah, that's a good solution. I mean, that's kind of what the voters supported, so the production will go back into green projects. That's really worthwhile, so.
And then one other thing I was going to say about the battery storage, besides sort of the details that were up there, after their useful life in 10 years, right now, we don't have a lot of information on what you do with those batteries and how much it costs to get rid of them responsibly. And so, those are some of the things we were thinking about with an initial high price tag, then, kind of what happens then. So I think the technology will keep coming around. We know battery technology is, progressing seemingly daily. So, I think that the town would want to venture down that road at some point, but I don't know that kind of going into it blindly is the best bet for us.
Can I add just one more thing on that? The new Inflation Reduction Act, we're seeing there's going to be heavily investment tax credit type structuring for that for standalone batteries and coupled with solar, particularly in school districts, normally non-taxable entities. And so my advice for what it's worth, I think there's going to be more incentives in the next year or so.
Great. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, I'll add on to that too from the solar perspective. So we're kind of digging through a lot of the Inflation Reduction Act now, but the town will actually be eligible for a 30% tax credit for this project that's not currently integrated into the project financials. So you can kind of think of that as like a 30% coupon for the project. We're going to dig into that a little bit more, but that's not currently included. And this is all kind of evolving real time, but I did want to mention that since Mike brought up the IRA.
Very good.
Do we have a solar installer contracted, or would it go out to RP, or how does that work?
We'd be working with McKinstry through kind of a design build contract, so we intend to keep them on through that, but we'll reach out to local contractors and make sure there's that we're giving local folks the opportunity to be part of the project.
And then I wondered if you could, probably this is a question for Ashley, if you could speak to the difference between having all of those different arrays co-located versus having them dispersed.
That might be a mic question.
Or a
too.
mic question.
Me again? Well, I can take a stab. I think, if you have them all located in one area, there's certainly economics of scale there that might help. But when we're getting into our net metering, it's kind of tricky. We're dealing with physical limitations, roof space, and it's probably easier and more viable from a cost perspective. Ashley, did I do okay on that, or what do you think?
Yes, I think we based a lot of it on project financials, and so a lot of it is based on Holy Cross's net metering capacity. So breaking down into smaller systems by meter actually makes it have better project financials than having it all on one site, because you kind of go over that net metering capacity and it becomes less economically viable the more you go over that limit from Holy Cross. And so we kind of optimize the systems based on those net metering policies from Holy Cross by site and by meter.
Thank you.
Ashley, is that $37,000 then based on the 5 cents per kilowatt? The $37,000 savings?
Yeah, I can answer that. Yeah, it's actually based on it's an aggregate of the savings across the sites, and so I think there were 2 different rates across all of the sites, and so they're a little bit different in each. And then it gets kind of wonky, but that we keep going back to the net metering cap, like because the export is at a much lower rate than your actual retail rate, it's the mix of those things. So I think we call it value of solar. So what savings do you actually expect per unit of energy produced by a PV system at a particular site? And I think it was ranging for these sites from 7 cents to 9 cents per kilowatt hour. And again, that's a function of what is the load at the building, what rate is that building on, and then the characteristics of the PV system production, and then the net metering policy. So there's a lot of pieces that actually go into it. And our analysis looks at it bottoms up. So we're sort of recalculating the bill, if you will, taking into account the solar production.
But if their net metering rates then change from 5 cents to 3 cents, or, you know, that's obviously going to affect the or the savings of the project. So that 37,000 could then go to 20,000.
So the wholesale, this might be a question for Mike, but it's true that if that wholesale cost for export changes, then obviously the savings change. If it goes up, obviously it gets better. If it goes down, it could get worse. If it's floating around, I think we use something on the order of 3 cents a kilowatt hour currently. I think it's been, one Mike can maybe speak to this, but I think it's been fairly stable around that. It might have been up for like a year, but that was probably an anomalous condition.
Yeah,
but
it's
wholesale.
Yeah, that's wholesale is where we can purchase energy, renewable energy on the open market, and it changes annually. And so because of the polar vortex in Texas, I won't bore you guys with all this stuff, but we saw a price spike last year. So it was 4.4 cents a kilowatt hour. Historically, we've seen it where we can buy that power, and point of indifference for us and our members is usually 3.5 cents. In terms of rate design, net metering, I think we might make some changes. I don't know yet. That's a board decision, so that could change the economics of the project.
This is great. You know, I think we have a pretty efficient little micro-hydro project that's whirring away on our water system, and now this, and so wind turbines are next. I'm reading up on residential scale tulip blade wind turbines, which are showing some promise. So, anyway, that's we're going to keep at it. So, thanks for Holy Cross. Thanks for your help and McKinstry. So, this all looks very promising. So,
I just have one more
yeah,
question.
go ahead.
On the DOLA grant, is there anything tied, like we saw on the Streetscapes grant, where
No,
it could?
that's much easier money.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
the strings attached are different. It's a pot of money that comes from the state versus Fed, so.
okay. And then on the 15-year payback, is that a normal? I mean, obviously, if we paid outright, it's 30 years. If we get the grant, it's 15 years. I remember when I bought my solar, I didn't go look at my notes, but I'm pretty sure they said 12-year. I don't think I've hit that, but I know they're all estimates. You can't predict how much the sun shines. Are those pretty good numbers? I know you guys are doing long-term forecasting, and it just seems like a long time for a payback.
Yeah, I would say they're pretty well-baked numbers. We will be actually measuring and verifying those savings for the first 3 years of the project through the state of Colorado, and you'll have that ongoing dashboard to see those. But we've done energy calculations on all of our projects for the past several decades, so we're pretty confident in those numbers. You will see it will go down a little bit once you get the Inflation Reduction Act credit as well, so it'll go below 15 years. I would say, I mean, what we typically see throughout the state varies based on which utility we're looking at, and then whether it's roof mount, ground mount, carport, size of system. This is a remote location, so I'd say this is actually 15 years after the grant is a pretty great payback for this specific portfolio and the geographic region that it's located in.
Just one other thought there is, maybe when you purchase your system too, I more thought about it from a life cycle value perspective. And so payback is obviously payback, but don't forget these systems typically have a 25, maybe even 30-year life cycle. So with the proper maintenance, and so if it's 37,000 a year, it's 15 years times roughly 37,000 a year for the life cycle value. So once you pay it off, it's providing that benefit straight back to the town.
Thank you.
Ryan, have we done a analysis of the Albany solar now that it's been installed for a year?
No, I don't think that we have.
That'd be interesting to see.
Yeah. And I don't know if there was a plan, but James, could you speak to that on a follow-up?
Yeah, there is a plan to do that. We're still kind of adjusting some of the controllers and stuff. We've got Colmac, who is the controller company that provided the heat pumps as well. They're actually this week doing some adjustment with climate control to make sure it's all working correctly. There was some kind of hiccups throughout the summer this year, and so we need some adjustments to
But the solar is running separately, right?
the solar is running separately. We haven't done the analysis on that, but we have the capabilities to do that.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to see.
But I think to James's point, we'll see what the offset is of electricity once the systems are working as they should. So you can see what it generates, but that doesn't tell you much for what, because these systems use energy still. So where do we come out as a kind of a net gain in energy savings?
And when we were talking about it as kind of the team here recently, you kind of have to do the analysis of the whole system for the most part together to understand, what efficiencies we're gaining. At least that's what we've been told from BG Building Works.
Okay.
So we're working on that.
Any questions for Catherine or Mike? Okay, guys, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. I think we.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, guys.
Good. Okay, next item up is we are on to council action portion of our agenda. Our first order of business is continued public hearing. You're sticking around? Okay.
I'm gonna maybe put you here and have Jeff and Amanda up there. So we're gonna keep Mike on deck. I think he's important to
Okay.
answer some questions if you may have them in the future, and I'll just kind of speak from here. So we know Mike Steiner, we have Amanda Poindexter here today, as well as Jeff Dickinson, and they are some of the folks that comprise our Green Codes Committee. So as you know, in August, this committee introduced.
Let me
Oh, I'm
introduce
sorry.
the
Pardon
item
me.
for the record. So this next order of business is a continued public hearing and first reading of ordinance number 16, series of 2022. It's an ordinance of the Town Council, Town of Basalt, Colorado, approving amendments to the Municipal Code, amending Town Code Section 18-23, Sustainable Building Regulations. Sarah, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so as you know, in August, this committee was before you. We introduced a number of proposed code amendments that focused on amendments to the Sustainable Building Regulations, to the Renewable Energy Mitigation Program, and we also asked the council to consider adopting, by way of resolution, a pathway to net zero. So at that meeting, we unloaded a lot of information. It was pretty dense, and council had instructed the committee to bring back some information in a number of different items, which were also elucidated in the memo. But I'm hoping to break this up into more digestible chunks for you this evening. So if you could go to the first slide, please. So I wanted to just kind of start with our objectives, right? Want to define the items, or kind of clarify the items that are above code that you're being asked to consider. Give you an update on the outreach. You were really concerned about making sure that we did enough outreach to the community on these. To update you on the changes that have been considered since the August meeting, as well as some clarifications that we thought were essential to bring forward. And then a cost analysis that was performed by the consultants here regarding these proposed changes. So we can start with the next slide, please. So just to talk about what are we asking you to consider that's really above code items? And those are, number one, the Basalt Sustainable Building Regulations. We've had those in place for a while now. These were amended last in 2018, and those amendments included checklists and a point system that was related for different types of development. And we also at that time implemented the continuing education requirements that are intended to keep the building professionals abreast of changes in sustainable building techniques. Within the residential development, there's been the home energy rating systems that has been around for a while, but what is going to be above code that's being proposed is a score of 40 or 45, depending on the type of development, and that is, of course, to get an improved efficiency within a building. We are proposing mandatory on-site renewable energy systems, as well as readying for future system installations. Remodels will require energy assessments as well as blower door tests before and after construction to ensure increased energy efficiency. We're also proposing benchmarking of buildings that are commercial buildings that are 20,000 square feet plus. You may know that last fall the state passed a House bill that required commercial, multifamily, and public buildings over 50,000 square feet to be benchmarked, which is like reporting their annual energy and water consumption uses. So we're suggesting that for 20,000 square feet. And as well as, making changes to the renewable energy mitigation program. And this program requires property owners to offset exterior energy uses. It's been around for quite some time. We're talking about pools, spas, fire pits, etc. So it's not new to the town, it's an active program, but we are suggesting some changes to that program. So we have engaged in a lot of outreach and education regarding these code amendments. So prior to that last August meeting, staff had performed outreach by ways of emails to literally hundreds of contractors, architects, and design professionals within the Roaring Fork Valley. The email summarized the proposed changes. Amanda had also created a video, so we sent that link within that email, and it was also uploaded to the building department's webpage. We also advertised the amendments in a local newspaper, and it was also advertised several times on social media websites. So since that last meeting, we've continued to solicit feedback from design professionals. We've received comments and questions from several local firms, in fact. And the feedback that we received was used in consideration of the changes to the prior amendments. And in order to kind of clarify what was changed, we've highlighted those changes in yellow within your packet. So you'll find those within exhibits A through D to the ordinance. So staff also created a question and answer sheet that we have posted on the building department webpage, and that's been updated, I think, 3 times since we started that with, questions and responses. And we also met directly, via Zoom, with a couple of the design professionals that wanted to hash out some points. So we can go to the next slide, please. Just outline some of the changes, or the changes, since the August first reading. So we did remove items that were duplicative from the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code, or the IECC. Those were removed. It kind of created a little bit, too much bulk to the code, as well as it was unnecessary, as the 2021 IECC will be adopted as a separate process, and we can kind of talk about that a little further on. Solar requirements for residential remodels, that was reduced to 2 watts of photovoltaic equivalent for biofuel homes, so the homes that are using both electricity as well as gas, and 1.5 watts for all electric homes. This is down from a requirement of 3 watts, and so of course it's incentivizing all electric homes. We formalized an exemption pathway at the request of council. A request can be made to a building official the request would be defined on, based on a defined hardship, an undue burden, or inability for the requirement to be successfully performed or installed on site. And the building official would make a recommendation to the SBR, Sustainable Building Regulations Committee. The committee would review and make a determination on the request. And of course, there is the ability within that request and within the code to appeal that decision to town council. So also we've clarified off-street parking. Formerly, the requirement for electric vehicle or electric ready spaces were to be in addition to the required parking on a site, and we realize that that's just not a good use of the land of individual sites. So that has been included rather than in addition to requirements. The applicability of the sustainable building regulations to remodels was formerly, that tipping point was formerly at 500 square feet, and we've upped that to 750 square feet, so as to allow smaller projects to be able to happen. And then just changes were made to several of the definitions, and those were made in order to match those that are found in the IECC, for the sake of compatibility of these documents. Language was clarified in several areas, and that was with feedback from the design community that really helped us see that there were some clarifications that were needed. It doesn't change the content, but it really just clarifies those points. And in one case, there was actually an error that was caught and corrected where there were some HERS scores that were kind of flipped. So good corrections that were made. And if you could go to the next slide, please. So just want to clarify a few items. We talked about, there's some confusion, I think, at the last hearing as if there was a penalty to sites that were not good solar receiver sites. We know that there's very few of those sites within the town of Basalt. We generally have very good solar access for our sites. But for those few sites that are determined not to be adequate receiver sites for solar, there is no penalty. There's no additional fee. Owners of those sites will meet their solar requirement by purchasing energy through the Holy Cross Pure program. That's powered by 100% renewable energy sources, and we'll provide some more information if council is interested on that. We talked about the need to have a liaison for the sustainable building regulations, but just want to clarify, Amanda actually does serve that purpose. The town is contracted with for Full Circle Construction, and that is Amanda. She serves to guide the applicants through that SBR process. She goes through the spreadsheet, she shows where points can be gained for projects, and she's available to answer questions. So I just want to impress upon that point that is available. Our renewable energy mitigation or REMP program, just want to clarify that there's the updates. This program's been in place for ages. The updates capture some items that with the current program can't be offset through a payment in lieu option, for mitigation. It brings in other items such as heat tape that were not previously considered under the REMP program. And it updates the method for calculating such things as snow melt so that it's common with other neighboring communities within our valley. And we also have this REMP calculator created, which is this great tool. It's going to be an online tool and available for use by the public. And lastly, the energy code, a House bill that was previously or passed this previous spring. It's going to require all residential and commercial buildings statewide to adhere to the 2021 IECC or equivalent beginning July 1st, 2023. So all our municipalities within the Roaring Fork Valley are currently working with a code expert consultant to craft energy code in such a way that it meets the needs of our community. So we're kind of not just, adopting everything across the board. We're kind of saying, how does this tailor to our community? And I think that's really important. So the energy code adoption is going to be following in the coming months, as well as the adoption of the 2021 building code. And James, can you go to the next slide, please? So this is just kind of just a setup so Jeff can share his cost analysis. Council at the last meeting was very interested in what is this going to cost per project, from remodels to new builds, small homes to larger projects. So the committee performed a cost analysis of these items with photovoltaic, electric ready on a variety of different types of projects. We did pattern some after like small lots, like our new Stotts Mill lots that will have smaller single families on them. as well as larger mixed-use projects with intent of focusing on something like the BCC parcel development. So Jeff, I'll just kind of pass this over to you. But I want to say that the goal has been to keep the costs associated with these code amendments items in the area of 5% or less of the total project cost. And you'll see that, Jeff's going to be sharing, if you can share that spreadsheet. We did make some assumptions. Assumptions were made. There was a best educated guess, of course, on construction per square foot. That's subject to change. This is a document that can be, we've made some estimates and some calculations here, but things can be changed if we knew the true cost of a project, construction cost, for instance. So I'll turn it over to Jeff for more discussion.
Great, thanks, Sarah. You all saw a snapshot of this in your packet, but I didn't know if there are any particular questions. Like Sarah said, we made assumptions based on the cost of construction. Obviously, it varies. Is it $400 a square foot? I don't know. Tell me another number, I'll put it in. That's the beauty of spreadsheets, right? But we're just trying to get a sense of the magnitude. In the top one, it's we're really looking at additions and new homes. So if it was a biofuel, which means gas and electric, there's a home, 3,500 square feet, and a small home. So we just ran numbers based on those at that 400. And you'll see on the far right, the payback number is a lot lower than the analysis for the large municipal projects. And that's because we used rebates, some of the future incentives that are coming, and a lot of the tax, assuming somebody's going to take full advantage of the tax rebates. Again, all these numbers are, we can put in different numbers. We took based on NREL's number of, we used a certain number of average production per kilowatt of a PV system that's installed. So again, a number of assumptions, but we were trying to get that percentage of construction down below the 5% number. We looked at PV, we looked at electric ready, all those kinds of things. And we were feeling that, we were able to keep those numbers pretty low, but whether it's a biofuel home or a all-electric home, addition, those kinds of things. And again, the payback numbers are pretty low compared to what you were seeing before, but felt like those are pretty good numbers. Even if they were higher, they would be, they'd be good. And then they continue to produce electricity and payback for the residents or the commercial projects. So I don't want to go into every cell and bore you guys. You could bring out a pot of coffee and work on that if you want. But if there's any questions, I can dig into that. Maybe that's the better way to do it.
That's good.
Yeah, and I think that, what we'd like to do is, of course, hear any questions that you might have or the public might have. Find out if there's any information that you'd like us to bring back to you. We would suggest council adopting the ordinance number 16 at first reading and scheduling second reading for September 27th. And also to consider at that second reading the adoption of Resolution 49, which is the path to net zero. And we do, if you need a reminder on that, we do have some slides too on that, but happy to open it up to any questions that council may have.
Yeah, let's, before we take questions from council, this is a public hearing, so we will open the meeting for public comment from anyone in the audience that would like to address council, or anybody that's may want to call in virtually, comment on the building code amendments. Anybody here publicly? Come on up.
Noticing the podium's not made for vertically challenged people, so I will do my best here. So I'm Katie. I'm a local homeowner in Basalt. And Emma, I also actually own the fireplace company. So we are the largest fireplace installer here in the valley, and there's just been some concerns brought to my attention that I have been asked to speak on behalf of the industry and just, affordable heating within the valley. So I think I want to read a couple of points that I was given here to read today. So, so we believe that homeowners and renters should have a choice.
Natural gas helps keep energy and utility bills affordable. We just talked about how expensive the battery backup systems are. I don't know how accurate these numbers are, but it could be cost prohibitive as we're looking at already a very, very expensive valley to live in. So, it seems like we're separating further and further the ability to live within the Basalt community. Natural gas complements electricity very well. It's resilient to providing heat. When storms knock out electric power, if our battery backup systems aren't robust enough, then nobody's going to have heat if we're in an all-electric system. So we just need to consider how really the buy system, we believe, is the better system and way to go. Gas systems also do have battery backup, so they do work in the event of a full power outage in the valley. We also want to consider that these, vessels of how we're transmitting natural gas now are in the future going to be used for hydrogen as also renewable natural gas. So if we're not piping them in now, it's going to be very expensive to pipe them in the future when those renewable energy sources are available. I think those are really the main points. Electric is just a lot more expensive to run for the long haul. They also give up much less heat. We're talking like 5,000 BTUs versus like 55,000 BTUs. So these are all just things that we would like the committee to consider as they are thinking about making these decisions.
All right, thank you. So, questions from council? Did anyone call in? Looks like.
We do have a couple on the Zoom call. If you're on the Zoom call and you would like to speak on this item, if you could please raise your hand on the Zoom. Looks like we have Megan. Megan, if you can unmute, you should be able to speak to the council.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yep, we got you. Good evening.
Hi, my name's Megan, and I also work at the fireplace company. And although I do believe that it's not just about fireplaces, it's more about affordable housing. I personally don't live in Basalt because it is too expensive for me. And I am in my 20s, and I do believe that Basalt is currently looking into purchasing affordable housing. And if they are looking into purchasing affordable housing, then there should also be an effort to look into affordable heating and cooling systems too. So I think I heard that, with the solar grid and everything, that we won't see profits turn around within 15 years. Why make the big push for electric if we won't see the profits for a long time? And who's to say that the grid can really sustain a Colorado winter like we have? When we saw the rolling blackouts in Texas just last year, people with all electric had no option. Their pipes burst and they were freezing, and it was like a state of an emergency. Even just last year when the gas was shut up and off in Aspen, it became almost a state of an emergency. So I think that piping for gas and completely getting rid of gas, it might not just be the best choice in our economy at this moment. There is definitely a room for growth, and we're getting there, but we're not quite there yet. So I really appreciate, this push for green energy and everything. But backtracking a bit, coal is what creates electricity, and who say that coal isn't emitting emissions into the air. So I just would like to leave it at that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay.
Is there anybody else on the Zoom call that would like to raise their hand?
I was just going to note that Mary Wiener's on. She is with Holocaust Electric and can answer questions that you may have about the grid and
okay, great.
That type of stuff.
Great.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm not there in person. I'm Mary Wiener, and I do the energy efficiency and building electrification programs. And hearing the comments, I hear people's concern about going all electric, and there's a couple of things I want to point out. One is I want to make people, and this came from some Black Hills people, their rate tripled in January. So they went from about 80 cents a therm to $1.85 a therm in January, which makes our electric rates pretty competitive now with Black Hills energy rates. I had a lot of complaints from members about how much their Black Hills bill went up this last winter. I also want to talk about the health and safety of having an all-electric home instead of having some gas in there. There's some new studies out that say having gas in your home is about equivalent to having a smoker inside your house. And there's just a lot of studies about the health and safety between gas and electric. And I can share some of those reports with you if you would like. So I think that's another benefit of going all electric, is not only it's the health and safety of everybody in the house. Holy Cross is 50% renewable, and we hope to be 100% by the end of the decade, which is only 8 years. So we don't burn a lot of coal right now. And our members can also offset and go 100% and help us get to that 100% with our Pure program for a small fee every month. And then the last thing I just want to really bring up is the problem in Texas. It was very frightening. People actually started using propane or gas generators, and they died of carbon monoxide poisoning. And they also really learned that their homes weren't insulated correctly. Air sealing and insulation, and Amanda and Jeff can back me 100% on this, the importance of having a tight building envelope and so that your pipes don't burst is really important. Our homes are a little better insulated than they were in Texas. And the last point I'm going to make is that heat pumps, the cold climate heat pumps do work. Yes, they are more expensive than a gas furnace, but they're 3 times more efficient. So when you look over the long run of the life of that piece of equipment in your home, which will last about 20 years, it's going to pay for itself a lot quicker than with a gas or a boiler. So I just want to point out those couple of things, that's why we're pushing toward all electric, because these heat pumps are a coefficient of 3 versus 1. And so, and they do heating and cooling. And with the IRA now and the rebates, it's the incremental cost difference just got even closer to putting in, let's say, a gas furnace and central AC.
Thanks, Mary. So, anyone else?
Does not look like it.
I don't think so. Okay, then questions from council for staff or for Amanda? No, thanks. I think you guys have been responsive. We asked you to look at skips. We asked you to look at skips, financial impact, pathway for exemptions, and peer group contractor kind of communications. I think you've checked all those boxes, so I'm pretty pleased that with the response to that. I would, after Ryan asked this question, I would like to hear about what comments you may have gotten. I read the packet, but it looked like you just alluded to some communications that you received, and maybe if you could characterize those, that'd be, in general, it'd be good to know. Ryan, go ahead.
One of them, I appreciate the cost analysis. I feel like it just targets one part of all of the regulations, which is the solar. I guess I would wonder what other, there's obviously hundreds of pages of different changes that would be made into the building code, and I know some of them are just general, I guess from construction cost standpoint, when you are requiring some of these things, let's say, it's a whatever type of wood you're using, or on the material side and on the construction side, that's where I guess I was going with the cost. I do appreciate the breakdown of the EV and the solar, and I think that's very valid, but I guess it's the general cost associated with the whole program. Does this raise cost by 10%, 20%, 30%, or is it kind of flat?
Sure. So the program has been in place for quite a few years now. Obviously, the cost impact depends on what line items in that checklist you're pursuing points for, and the fines associated with not hitting those points, because obviously the goal is for you to incorporate those different materials and technologies, and just thinking about making a smaller impact throughout the project instead of paying those fees. That's the last ditch effort there. But I definitely have talked to contractors who have gone through the program, and they're like, oh, now, maybe we wouldn't pursue the timber strand studs, maybe it's a better investment and it's cheaper to up our insulation values in the roof or the walls. And so I think those, because it's been in the code for a while, and people have gone through it a couple times and have definitely chosen I'd rather choose a more efficient heating, a more efficient furnace than putting in locally made cabinets or something. It really, there's so many choices there, and it's just up to what the clients want and what the contractors choose, and the architect.
And then I guess my only other question, and it's probably directed at Jeff, is there any conflict of interest of having Amanda help write this stuff and then also be the liaison for it of the town?
I mean, Amanda's consultant to be that liaison. This is a change to, this is a legislative proposal to the code, and I think it's really her role in this is relying on her expertise in working with it. I don't think she is
I know she wrote it herself, and it's a group of, yeah.
Well, and I would just add to that she was directed to assist in coming up with these legislative changes, and I think they'd also been modified through discussion with industry folks, and so she's just ultimately administering what council adopts, not what she adopts, and she just happens to be the person that helps us interpret them and get people through a process. So she doesn't stand to gain from them, because it's ultimately the council's decision.
So just out of curiosity, do we have like a comparison of how often people just pay the mitigation fee versus following the program? Like, how effective is it?
It's been really effective, actually. Usually, I'll go through and I do a specific plan review for the energy code and SBR stuff, and if they have a large fine for those construction documents, they actually incorporate in throughout the whole project different things to get points in certain areas to avoid fees, and it really, the projects I see that have like a large gap at the beginning definitely limit that gap throughout the construction, because they just would rather not pay those fees, and that would benefit the owner and them in the long run. And I'd say probably 90% of the projects that end up paying a fee, it's just for a couple points here and there. It's nothing huge.
Can you speak to the resiliency aspect? Because that is a continuing concern of mine, and I will share that the apartment building I live in is all electric except for a fireplace in the lobby. And when the electricity went out for, 6 hours or so in the middle of winter a couple years ago, we were all huddling in the lobby. So I'm all for, moving forward and, electrification, beneficial electrification and all that good stuff that's gonna benefit our climate crisis. But at the same time, I also don't want people freezing in their homes. So if you could just address that.
Sure. So actually, I remember that because I was living in the RV park at the time and ran out of propane as well, and it was not fun.
Yeah.
But you know, an RV is very not insulated and very not airtight, and so that was really uncomfortable. And so that's why, you know, the energy code is the number one item that's addressing, you know, your sweater and your jacket of the house, and really making sure that when anything does go wrong, like Mary said, it's, you know, you're not gonna have pipes burst and stuff because you have a airtight and well-insulated home or apartment to begin with. And then maybe Mary can talk a little bit about other resiliency items, or Jeff, but that's what I think is just, yeah, having that airtight, you know, your jacket on with your shell is pretty key.
And I think we've talked about the trend toward batteries, and, you know, we're not there on that large scale. That was a very expensive take, but Holy Cross has programs to allow the battery backup, so you're able to get that battery backup tied with solar. You have a pretty efficient, resilient program, you know, for your own home.
And then my other thought, and I know we have increased the square footage to 750 square feet, but, and this is more of a general comment for council to think about when we have that conversation about additional affordable housing regulations, but just making sure that we aren't impeding people from adding ADUs in order to supply additional housing. So I want to make sure that we're balancing those needs.
Comment?
When we initially looked at that, 500 square feet, the thought that came to my mind is, I know you don't see it as often, but you think of a garage that could be converted to living space if the floor area was allowing it. And, you kind of want to be able to help out those smaller projects that aren't super significant. And that's why when we talked it through, and 750 felt like a number that becomes a bit more significant than looking at it as a garage conversion of something of that nature.
Yeah, no, I noted that for sure, but just want to make sure that we're all conscious about that as well.
I appreciate that.
So I think I asked this question last time, but I would like to ask it again. What other municipalities have implemented a 25% on-site renewable? I know Aspen has, but do you know?
Carbondale's in the process of it.
So
I believe Boulder does.
Denver?
We could do some more. We could definitely bring you back some more information on that if you'd like. Give you some sort of kind of grasping, give you something more concrete.
yeah, I don't intend it to slow us up, but maybe by second reading, if you could kind of recap who's doing this.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Motion? Don't all rumble at once here.
Mayor, I move that the town council adopt ordinance number 16, series of 2022 on first reading, and set the public hearing and second reading to September 27th, 2022.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Pam, please call the roll.
Absolutely. Let's begin with Elise Hoddle,
Yes.
Bill Kane,
Yes.
Ryan Slack,
Yes.
Peter Schindler,
Yes.
Glenn Drummond,
Yes.
Angela Anderson.
Yes.
That's everybody.
Great, thank you guys. This is good work, so.
Thank you.
Sarah, is there any way to share some of the feedback from the building community with us before second reading?
Yeah, I could certainly, what I had added in the packet was the stuff that kind of made it to the Q&A. A lot of it, there was a great deal from one of the architects at KA Design Works who kind of went through, to his credit, went through item by item and just really helped us with the clarification of language. Nothing that was like refuted, but like, hey, this could read better this way. And then there was just some items that when we would just kind of sit and hash out with some of the design professionals, like this is where we're coming from, this is where you're coming from, And so I think we captured it pretty well.
Okay.
But I'm happy to see what, what else we can gain and, within that process and what else we could share.
Awesome.
Sure.
And just add on to that, there wasn't one point that was a deal killer. I mean, there were no points. It was just kind of working through some little details to refine the language. There wasn't an overall issue on any of the items, so
Okay.
it was encouraging.
It was helpful, definitely,
Mm-hmm.
I would say.
Good.
Yeah, for
All
fine
righty,
tuning, for sure.
so, thank you. We
Thank you very much. Thank you.
now move on
See you in a couple
to
weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
item 7B, public hearing, first reading of ordinance number 19, series of 2022, ordinance of the town of Basalt, Colorado, approving amendments to the municipal code, section 1813, tree management. James and Chris. Chris Beazer.
Yeah, thank you. This item is a public hearing and first reading of an ordinance that would approve of amendments to Town Code Section 18-13, which is the tree management section of the code. The proposed amendments are attached in the draft ordinance that you have in your packet, and they were recommended for approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission. The amendments are intended to better clarify tree removal mitigation requirements, as well as to allow for the town arborist, Chris Beiser, to more effectively administer tree removal permits. Chris is on the Zoom this evening, and he can more fully discuss the amendments. Chris, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's fine.
All right, so the vast majority of any of the amendments that we're making in this section is really just clarification and updating a lot of the technical terminology to better reflect what current industry standards uses. The biggest chunk of updates that isn't simply just clarifying or helping to kind of line out how we enforce this tree management policy would be in section D, I believe, or part D, the actual re-permitting process. In the current ordinance, it's actually outlined that it's up to the sole discretion of the Public Works Director to decide what mitigation requirements are required by tree removals. And it kind of ended it right there at that. So I've been using this process since I started working here the past 2 years, have come up with kind of a dichotomous key sort of process to figure out how to standardize mitigation requirements. And that's the part that I've really added a lot to. Breaking it down, first of all, into is the removal a live tree? Is it a dead tree? Is it an invasive or a diseased tree that has the potential to threaten other trees around it? And then going from there based on tree size removal, number of trees removed, and allowing for flexibility in certain situations of like a heritage tree, a tree that has certain importance to the town, trees that may be imposing on infrastructure issues, things like that. That is all outlined in this large section that you're looking at right now. And the majority of it all kind of points to how many replacement trees or an equivalent fee would the homeowner be required to pay in the case of whatever they're removing. It also I do leave in there the flexibility for, obviously every case is kind of unique with tree removals. So this is not a hard and fast rule, but it's something that I can kind of point to for homeowners of how we standardize things in the town. So it doesn't ever feel like any homeowner is being singled out per se, or feel like they're, being asked more than, say, maybe their neighbor that removed trees the year before. I can use this to kind of point to exactly how we came to the decisions for mitigation and what's being considered. There's also some new wording in here, just kind of tying in other ordinances that we do also enforce. For instance, this line G here, bringing into the equation the environmentally sensitive area and riparian areas around the river. That is something we currently do enforce, but there was really no mention of it in our tree ordinance and how it kind of affects tree mitigation. So I've included some language kind of tying in other ordinances to the tree management ordinance and how those kind of play with each other. And then at the very end, there is a section for the valuation of trees. In very rare cases, if we have to come up with essentially a value for a tree, in the current ordinance, we literally have it as that basic value equation in there, which is really taken out of context for what its purpose is. That's kind of a starting value that you would give to any particular tree, and then you use various other factors to either increase or reduce that amount. And there's been a lot of confusion in the current ordinance when people say, oh, well, I looked into this, and based on this, you're valuing my 12-inch DBH cottonwood at thousands of dollars, and are you going to charge me to remove that at that cost? Well, no, I've now added a point that we're using this tree valuation from the Guide for Plant Appraisal, which is the industry accepted appraisal process for trees, and that there are more factors that just simply can't be listed in a simple tree ordinance without getting overly complicated. So I'm trying to kind of, again, bring context to a lot of the rules that we have already established in this ordinance. I've also made a clarification that removal of a tree is not only limited to 100% removal of the tree. I've run into a couple cases where a homeowner had a 3-trunk huge tree in their backyard. They removed 2 of the 3 trunks, and they didn't think in their minds that was considered removal. But we do have it clarified now that if it is removing more than 50% of the canopy, or removal of one or more trunks from a multi-stem tree, has the potential to fall under the removal and mitigation process that the town has outlined. That's roughly the updates that I'd like to make to this, the amendments I'd like to make to it. There is a comment in there allowing the town to deny tree removal permits in very specific situations. We didn't previously have that language, and it kind of outlines reasons for why it may be denied and what the town is required to provide in those situations as far as an explanation or why it was denied, or how they can come into compliance for it to be allowed.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address council on the tree ordinance amendments? Anybody calling in that would like to address council on the tree management ordinance amendment?
If you are on the Zoom call and would like to make comments on this item to the town council, if you could please raise your hand on the Zoom.
Is that Doug McDonald that's on?
Yeah. It does not look like anybody's raising their hand on the Zoom for comments.
Okay, council comments, questions for Chris Beazer?
Chris, I really appreciate this. I do have one question. Were you a part of removing the tree in front of the old elementary school? Do you know about that tree being removed?
You'd have to be more specific about that. I did do some work.
It's the tree next to the bell. Well, was the tree next to the bell, right in front of the old elementary school, next to the chain link fence. It was a very favorite tree of many kids.
Old cottonwood?
No, it's an old apple tree.
It's the red brick school on the
next to the elementary school.
No, that was not me, and I actually was not involved in that. And that brings up a good point in that, part of these amendments is to try to help better enforce some of these policies, because I do know at the end of the day, it's just me out there trying to keep track of stuff that I see that I don't have a removal permit for instance. I'd have to kind of look into that specific situation though, but don't have any knowledge of that.
No problem. I'll send you some pictures.
Yeah,
some
absolutely.
Sad kids.
Aw.
Real sad kids.
Yeah, that's bad. When was it?
That brings up a good point, though, Chris, and maybe Ryan as well. Do we have a good communication strategy so that folks understand, that they need to talk to us about these things? Because, to Chris's point, I'm sure those people that took the trunks off thought, no big deal. It's in my backyard or whatever.
Just to point out, how I've kind of helped kind of get the point across that we need to kind of be in touch with homeowners with these removals. I've been using the strategy of speaking with contractors directly. So all of the tree care companies that are accredited in the valley, you know, I have good lines of communication with them. They're all very well aware that if there's a removal happening, it needs to come through me if it meets the removal requirements. The cases that are much harder to control are when, like you said, an individual homeowner grabs their chainsaw out of the, you know, garage and just goes to town on whatever they feel is appropriate. And at the end of the day, it kind of relies on me catching that or having one of my, you know, somebody that's out in the field bringing it to my attention.
When you have a relationship with the contractors, and like, what does that mean? Because you have, you know, one of your clauses in here says that you know, it's unlawful to
Prune a tree.
remove a tree without a permit, and that the public works director should receive 3 days notice. I almost wonder, like, if you get a tree permit, if you pull a tree permit to remove a tree, what's the point of then duplicating with 3 days notice? Especially if you're working with the contractors.
Yeah, you know, by working with contractors, I mean that I both employ them for work in the town, and have lines of communication to either their owner or a representative from their company. That, you know, at the end of the day, my goal is not to make things difficult for people to follow this rule. I've found that in order for ordinances like this to be followed, it helps to help facilitate people, make it easy for them and not a burden for them to have to put these permits in. I've often worked with homeowners that I've caught them mid-removal, and, you know, I go onto the site and I let them know that they're in violation of this, but hey, like, let's work together. I want to make sure that, you know, you're in compliance and the town is happy with what's being removed. That 3-day notice, I believe, is a leftover from the current ordinance. It's not something that I've added. And it's kind of there as a technicality more than in practice what ends up happening.
I think that one is also that you don't want the tree removal contractor showing up on, you know, at the person's house and then, you know, having you scramble to try to issue a permit. It's like,
correct.
We need
it does give me a
notice.
Correct. It does give me at least adequate time to be able to get out to the site and kind of make a determination of what's going on. In reality, I usually have about a 24-hour turnaround with these tree removal permits.
So does contractors provide the permit?
Usually,
it's a mix, I would say. Most often, I tell contractors that, you know, it's easier for the homeowner if they take care of this whole permitting process because they're more familiar with it. But I allow both homeowners as well as contractors to fill them out. In practice, I get probably about 50%. It's the homeowner coming to me before they've hired someone. And in the other case, it would be the contractor came out, did a consult for the homeowner, and then reached out to me to be able to approve the work.
How much do you see as, like, your job is sort of reactive to some, like, trunks that are already missing or things you stumble across, as opposed to contractors or people reaching out to you to seek the appropriate, I guess, methods to honor the code?
You know, I think initially when I started this job, there was a little bit more confusion. I think that my prior person in my position was a bit more relaxed on actually enforcing any of this. So there was a bit of a learning curve for some of these tree care companies, but just speaking from the last growing season, I think I've had exactly one situation where I've had to go on a site where I noticed a tree care company that was actually from out of the valley that had started doing tree work without any removal permits. And I essentially put a stop on their work until I spoke with the company owner and got all of their paperwork in order and made sure they understood the mitigation requirements and things like that. So to answer your question, reactive wise, it was more last year when I was first trying to get, you know, kind of the house in order, so to speak. This year, it's very little is reactive, and it's been much more. I've been able to work with homeowners pretty easily, and for the most part, you know, word travels fast. When one homeowner removes a tree, you know, and they go through this process, then the neighbor that needs to get the tree removed ends up, you know, following up with that neighbor on what they had to do. And I also work pretty closely with most of the HOAs that are that make up the various neighborhoods in town, and they're all aware of the rules, as well as I try to work with them on what their, you know, HOA rules are to make sure all parties are happy in the process.
Okay, any other questions, comments? I'm sure this is gonna be helpful to have this stuff standardized. I know, you know, DBH and all these things, you know, become very confusing if it's not really spelled out. So
Yeah, and like I said, my point of all this is to try to make it as, tree removals can be very contentious, both of the person doing the removals as well as the surrounding neighbors. And to be able to standardize this really just gives me something I can kind of point to and say, hey, everybody follows the same rules. You know, we're not singling you out because, I don't know, I don't like that tree, or that was my favorite tree in the town. This is something we can point to say, hey, this is the rule, and this is kind of how we go about everything.
All right.
Mayor, I move that the town council adopt ordinance number 19, series of 2022 on first reading, and continue and set the public hearing and second reading to September 27th, 2022.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Pam, please call the roll.
Absolutely. Let's begin with Bill Kane.
Yes.
Dieter Schindler.
Yes.
Angela Anderson.
Yes.
Glenn Drummond.
Yes.
Elise Hoddle.
Yes.
Ryan Slack.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Keep up the good work. We move to item number 7C1. There's a 7C2. So 7C1 is resolution number 54, series of 22. Resolution of Town Council of Basalt, Colorado, approving an agreement for professional services with JVA Inc. for the development of a Basalt Water Utility Master Plan. Catherine and Boyd Beerbaum are going to enlighten us. So, good evening.
Thanks for having us, Mayor. As you all know, the town-owned municipal water system provides water treatment, storage, and distribution services to 925 connections in East Basalt. And town staff put out an RFP for the development of a Basalt Water Utility Master Plan. The purpose of this master plan is to inform the planning of capital improvements, the operations and maintenance, and then develop a rate structure that can help fund the water enterprise. We received 2 proposals by the due date of August 10th, and a team led by JVA and supported by Raftelis, a financial analysis firm, and HRS, a water resources engineering firm, was determined to provide the most qualified proposal. Tonight we have Cooper Best on the line with an appropriate background, it looks like.
Look at this kind of water plant behind him there.
And he's representing JVA, and I'll let him briefly introduce himself to you all.
Sure, thank you. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Good, gotcha.
Perfect. So thank you for having me. We appreciate the opportunity to work with the town on this very important infrastructure project. The Water Utility Master Plan is a very key document, and we look forward to working closely with all of town staff, along with our sub-consultants, as Catherine mentioned there, Raftelis and HRS. We worked with the town on projects in the past and feel like we have a very strong relationship and have done a lot of very similar projects, including the one behind me right now. That's the Mount Cresta Buttes brand new water treatment plant and pump station that just came online this year.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so staff would just recommend approving that resolution with JVA to engage them in the development of the master plan, and Boyd and I are happy to answer any questions you have around that work.
I have a question, which you probably can't answer, but I wonder if it'd be worth taking on as part of the master plan, and it's this. So our principal source of water is Basalt Spring. So Basalt Springs, roughly 1.6 CFS, so we get 750 GPM from the Basalt Spring. We also have another junior right in Luxinger Spring, another spring. And, you know, I talked to a lot of people about resiliency in the town of Basalt and how fortunate we are. Our water right in the Basalt Spring is, the adjudication date is 1891, signed by David Brown, D.R.C. Brown, to the town of Basalt. We used to keep it in the safe out there. I don't know where it is now, but it's a pretty cool document. And what I think is fascinating to consider and be a neat thing to have in a water master plan is some investigation as to what that source of supply looks like and how durable it may be. You know, I like to think, I mean, that is, you know, we've got groundwater. So groundwater is a, you know, sort of suppressed image of the mountain topography of Basalt Mountain. All basalt, you know, it's like one big rapid sand filter up there. And there's a mountain of groundwater at a higher elevation than our spring. So it feels like pretty comfortable that, you know, we're gonna have water for a long period of time, productive water from that spring. But it'd be interesting to kind of think about that, you know, and I don't think it would be that complicated to do a cross-section and see theoretically how much water is actually posed up there, and, you know, with changing climate and all the rest of it, how reliable and how durable is that spring likely to be. It doesn't have to be precise, but it'd be really interesting as part of a long-term plan. You know, so our water portfolio is Basalt Spring, Luxinger Spring, and then we have all these alluvial wells, groundwater, which is all dependent on it's all dependent on the hydrologic cycle. But anyway, I just think it'd be really interesting to talk a little bit about the geology and history of that spring. It's a kind of a rich story, so I just throw that out. I think the public might be interested in knowing that.
The biggest change we saw was after the fire. We were walking around with Bill Blakesley, the water commissioner, and since the plants weren't taking the water, the springs were just overflowing like crazy.
Wow, backing up.
Yeah, you don't realize how much water like trees and plants take in. But Mr. Bill said there was water coming over the side of the mountain above the spring, and he said, I've never seen that.
Wow.
And so that was interesting to know that even after the fire, that didn't make everything just go woof. It actually added to it. So I know for initially, till maybe things redevelop, we're going to have quite a bit of water in that little picture of
Yeah, I just think, one of the really appealing things about living in Basalt is that we're so high in the Colorado River Basin that, you know, we have ironclad legal rights, and we've got presumably ironclad source of supply too, which, you know, is pretty important for the public to know about.
Yeah, the 800-pound gorilla on the western slope is Cameo. They can put the major call on.
Yeah, but, you know,
to
I don't know if they predate 1891.
Right.
But I think further to your point, Bill, it would be also interesting to have an analysis of carrying capacity. A lot of people are talking about, like, what can we sustain Mid-Valley? And, you know, we've talked about a little bit annexation of the few properties that are left that are on our borders. So I think, you know, as part of that, I'm totally interested, but I'm a water nerd, in the geology, but also in the carrying capacity aspect of it. You know, what really can we sustain?
Yeah, what does it portend for conservation measures and?
Right. And we're, like you said, Mr. Bill, we're very lucky because, you know, we have our well, we call it well 13. It's the one over by the school. But we only have a 9 and an 11 well. So out of the 13 wells, theoretically, we still have 10 wells we can drill. Plus we have rights in RUDI too.
That's right, 500 acre feet. Well, interesting stuff for sure. Well, questions or anyone want to make?
Well, actually, just for clarity, I guess my clarity, this, at the end of this, so in May, we walk away with the plan for the future.
That's right. Yeah, so I completely hear what the mayor's saying, and I think that we will be able to, you know, at least to some extent quantify the supply through a geology analysis, or at least a brief one, and maybe a brief look at the aquifer. But ultimately, we're really looking at the infrastructure of our system, and this plan will help us plan for budgetarily capital improvements, both at a 5-year and a 20-year interval, and then the associated fee structure for our users, so we can use that money to recoup some of the inevitable, you know, O&M costs as well as capital improvements. And then the hope as well with a lot of this federal money that's coming out as this master plan will set us up well to have, you know, clearly identified capital projects that will be ripe for hopefully receiving some of these monies from the feds and otherwise. So we'll be hopefully in a good place to really prioritize both staff time and funding going forward on both that 5-year planning and 20-year outlook. So.
And that filter bank right behind, I just went blank. On Cooper, yeah, on Coop's,
Yes.
right behind Coop, that filter bank, we have one, a very small one. The filters are supposed to last 10 years. We have such good water quality, we on our 20th year and didn't change them out yet. And so by having good water quality over the years, we've been real fortunate not to have to spend as much money. But it kind of gets to a point to where you got to do what you got to do. So we might get a few more years out of our filters and have to change them. You can always add another row of filters and increase your water production. So everything, we've been smart in what we've done. It's expandable, but we need to make sure we're keeping our distribution and infrastructure in decent shape to, you know, to keep our quality up.
And I would just add that the overarching umbrella to this planning effort would be looking towards efficiency, you know, conservation, and just keeping in mind that, you know, despite how lucky we are perhaps to have an ample supply, you know, the goal isn't to just use it to death, to make sure that we're you know, integrating all the right technologies to make sure that we're incentivizing conservation and resiliency, really.
And we've been fortunate to be able to donate so many acre feet, like to the river, keep the river cooled off and flowing. So whoever, you know, did the root eye, when I was at Carbondale, we bought acre feet, and Basalt bought acre feet. There were so many acre feet left, and municipalities went in and bought that acre feet to keep it from going to the east. So a lot of good planning has gone on.
So just, you know, kind of interesting background, back in 2010, we actually had a very detailed analysis of the water quality from Basalt Spring, and we outclassed all of the bottled water competitors, Aquafina, Fiji, basically, and if any constituent you wanted to look at, our water was pure. So we were actually thinking about, you know, creating an enterprise fund and starting Basalt Springs Water, Inc.
Competition with Nestle.
Nobody really wanted to do it, so it didn't happen.
I know
Good
Robbie is very proud of the water quality in town.
Yeah.
For good reason.
Yes.
Yeah, that triggered the outdoor fountain out there. That's so weird. That was going to be a major draw for the tourism industry. People come and sample our water, and then we thought,
Yeah, there's people who sit there and just push the button and let it, you know, go into like a container. They'll let you come in and get some of the faucet if you want
yeah,
to.
that'd be a problem. Okay.
Mayor, I
Any
move
questions? Go ahead, Louise.
that the town council adopt resolution number 54, series of 2022.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No opposed? Okay, so thank you. So the second piece of this was to support a letter, or to approve a letter of support for the town's application for the Colorado River District's community funding partnership to help fund the water utilities master plan, which is a great idea. And the district's having a big kind of water summit in Grand Junction.
They're having their big annual State of the River meeting coming up.
It's on Friday, I think.
Oh, is it this week?
Yeah, I think it's this week.
Okay.
That's gonna be an interesting one, because they're gonna
Yes.
recap, you know, the whole status of the Colorado Compact. It's going to be a pretty interesting meeting. Okay, so motion to approve the letter of support.
Mayor, I move the town council approve the letter of support.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, can I just add one thing? Is part of the requirements for this is also to get the letters of support from Eagle County and Pitkin County. And so those are also forthcoming. I think Pitkin County's was signed today, and Eagle County, I at least got communication from them that there's support, and they'll get it over to us on their letterhead so we can get the grant submitted.
Great. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
That concludes our affairs. I move that we adjourn.
Are these packets scanned?
Say that again?
Are the packets scanned?